This isn't a meditation, and there's nothing you need to do while listening. You don't need to change your breathing, settle your body, or try to quiet your mind. This is simply a gentle space to understand something many people experience at the end of the day, especially in the hours when everything around them has become quieter. For some people, nighttime is the very moment their mind seems to get louder. The day begins to fade. The outside world slows down. The practical things are for the most part done. And yet, instead of relief, there can be a sudden increase in mental noise. Thoughts begin circling. Conversations replay. Plans for tomorrow arrive early. Small concerns seem larger than they did a few hours before. Things that were manageable in the daytime can suddenly feel much heavier at night. If you know that feeling, you are far from alone. It can be deeply frustrating, especially when the body feels tired and all you really want is peace. The day is over, sleep is near, and yet the mind seems to step forward just as the rest of the world is beginning to step back. That can leave people wondering why it happens. Why does the mind seem quieter during the busyness of the day and louder when the house is still? Why can bedtime feel like the point where everything catches up with you? Why does the brain suddenly want to revisit every unfinished thing, every worry, every awkward moment, every task, every possibility, when all you want to do is rest? Very often, nothing is wrong with you. Your mind may be getting louder at night because nighttime is the first moment it has had enough space to be heard. I think that shift in understanding can be really important because many people assume that if their mind is noisy at night, it means they are bad at relaxing. They may tell themselves they should be able to switch off more easily. They may become frustrated with themselves, impatient with their thoughts, or anxious about what the noise in their mind means. But the mind does not always become louder at night because it is becoming worse. Sometimes it becomes louder because the distractions that were muting it during the day have finally gone quiet. In the daytime, there is often movement, stimulation, structure, responsibility, and external focus. You may be answering messages, speaking to people, managing tasks, going from one thing to another, solving problems, making decisions, and holding yourself together in all the practical ways life asks of you. That movement can create a kind of cover. It keeps your attention outward. It gives the mind other things to do. It may stop deeper thoughts and feelings from becoming fully audible. But nighttime is different. Nighttime removes some of those layers. The house gets quieter. The phone is put down. The tasks are paused. The lights soften. You are no longer moving through the day in the same active way. And in that stillness, what has been sitting underneath the surface can begin to rise. That is one reason the mind can feel louder at night. It is not necessarily producing more. It may simply be revealing more. And what it reveals can be varied. For some people, it is mental load, a list of practical things that still need attention. For others, it is emotional residue from the day. Something someone said, a conversation that felt unfinished, a tension they had no time to process. For others, it is worry about tomorrow, uncertainty about the future, or the general feeling of carrying too much for too long. Sometimes it is not even one specific thing. Sometimes it is just the sound of an overstimulated nervous system in a quiet room. Because the mind and the nervous system are closely linked, and when the nervous system has been holding a lot all day, nighttime may be the first moment that holding becomes fully noticeable. This is often what people mean when they say they feel too tired but unable to switch off. The body may be exhausted. The eyes may feel heavy. There may be a genuine longing for rest. But the system is not yet settled. And that unsettled state often sounds like thoughts. Not always dramatic thoughts, sometimes just repetitive ones, circular ones, evaluating ones, planning ones, thoughts that seem to loop without resolution, thoughts that feel more urgent at 10 p.m. than they do at 10 a.m. And when that happens repeatedly, it can start to create a difficult relationship with nighttime itself. People begin to dread the hour when they have to go to bed. They anticipate the noise in their own mind before it has even begun. They may try to force calm, pressure themselves to switch off, or become increasingly tense about the fact that they are still thinking. But the mind rarely quiets through force. Pressure tends to make it louder. Not because you are doing something wrong, but because the nervous system hears demand very clearly. It hears the thought, I need to stop thinking. It hears the panic around being awake. It hears the frustration, the urgency, the expectation that you should be somewhere other than where you are. And very often that sense of inner demand gives the mind even more energy. This is why understanding matters. Understanding does not make every difficult night disappear, but it changes the relationship to what is happening. It softens the story. It creates less fear around the experience itself. Instead of thinking, "Why is my mind doing this to me?" you may begin to think, "What has my system been carrying today that it has not had time yet to release?" Instead of, "I should be able to switch off by now," it becomes, "Perhaps my mind is speaking more loudly because this is the first quiet moment it has had." That is a very different way of meeting yourself. And I think many people need that gentler frame, because so much of modern life encourages us to manage ourselves harshly, to optimize, to fix, to perform rest as though it is another task to complete successfully. But rest does not usually begin with pressure. Quiet does not usually begin with force. The mind is not something we bully into peace. It often softens when it feels less watched, less judged, and less rushed. If this kind of gentle understanding resonates with you, I share longer reflections, guided practices, and deeper nervous system support inside my Bliss Yoga and Wellness community. The link will be in the description below. And for now, we can simply stay here together in this understanding. One of the reasons the mind gets louder at night is because there has often been very little transition between the pace of the day and the pace of the evening. Modern life tends to ask us to move quickly between states. We go from problem solving to lying down, from blue light to darkness, from being mentally engaged all day to suddenly expecting inner stillness. And for many people, that shift is simply too abrupt. The nervous system has not had enough signal that the active part of the day is ending. The body often needs a bridge, something gradual, something repetitive, something softer than a sudden stop. Without that bridge, the mind can continue moving at daytime speed, even though the body is trying to enter nighttime. This is why so many people find themselves revisiting the day as soon as they get into bed. It is as though the mind says, "Now that you have stopped, here is everything we didn't get to process while you were busy." That is not failure. It is often backlog. Mental backlog. emotional backlog, nervous system backlog. And once you understand that, the loudness of the mind can start to feel less threatening. Not pleasant, perhaps, but less personal. Less like evidence that something is fundamentally wrong with you, and more like information about what your system has been carrying without pause. It also explains why nighttime can feel surprisingly emotional. Thoughts are rarely just thoughts. They often carry feeling beneath them. Regret, sadness, anticipation, fear, pressure, grief, responsibility. When the mind gets louder at night, it is not always because it wants to torment you. Sometimes it is because there is finally enough quiet for these feelings to come into awareness. That can be tender. It can be exposing. It can feel very lonely. And if you have been holding a lot lately, that tenderness may arrive with extra force once the world goes still. This is one reason nighttime can sometimes become the most honest part of the day. There is less distance between you and what is true. And that truth may sound like repetitive thinking, but underneath it, there is often something deeper asking to be noticed. Not necessarily solved, not instantly fixed, but noticed. This is where compassion becomes especially important. Because a mind that gets loud at night does not usually need more criticism. It does not need you to tell it is ridiculous or inconvenient or weak. It usually needs what the nervous system always needs when it is struggling to settle. Less threat, more softness. A kinder tone, a little more patience, a little less urgency. That does not mean agreeing with every thought or treating every worry as important. It means understanding that loudness is often a sign of activation, not a sign that every thought deserves your full attention. The mind gets louder when the system is more alert. And the system becomes more alert when it feels overstimulated, emotionally loaded, or pressured. So the path is not usually, how do I silence the mind? It is more often, how do I create enough safety that the mind no longer needs to keep speaking this loudly? This is a much gentler question, and it opens the door to a different relationship with night. Not as a battleground, not as an exam you keep failing, but as a time when your body may need more understanding than the world has offered it during the day. I also think it is worth saying that a loud mind at night is not always about worry in the traditional sense. Sometimes it is simply momentum. The brain has been active all day. The nervous system has been receiving input all day. The speed has not yet reduced. Just as the body cannot always go from running to stillness instantly, the mind often cannot go from high engagement to quiet without some transition. That is especially true for people who live in their heads a lot. People who think deeply, plan constantly, anticipate, analyse, care for others, carry invisible labour, or feel responsible for many things at once. Nighttime may be when all of that becomes most audible. Again, that does not make you broken. It may simply mean your system has become practiced at staying mentally online. And if that is true, the mind's loudness is not a character flaw. It is a pattern. A pattern the body has learned for reasons that probably make sense somewhere along the way. That can be such a relieving perspective, because patterns can be met with gentleness. They do not need to be shamed. And often the first real shift is not in making the mind quieter by force, but in feeling less frightened of the noise. When fear reduces, activation often reduces too. When shame reduces, tension often reduces too. When the body feels less judged for being where it is, the whole system has more room to soften. That is one of the quiet truths about rest. It tends to come more easily when there is less pressure around it. Not because pressure is always conscious. Often it is subtle. It is the little internal commentary, the expectation that you should be asleep by now, the belief that something has gone wrong because you are still thinking, the urgency around tomorrow, the resentment of your own mind, the wish to skip over what is happening and get straight to peace. But peace rarely arrives by being demanded. It usually arrives by being made a little more possible through softness, through signal, through understanding, through time. That is why even educational reflections like this can help. Not because information is a sleep aid in itself, but because understanding can reduce fear, and reduced fear can soften the system. Sometimes knowing why your mind gets loud at night is the first thing that helps it feel less powerful. Because the loudness stops meaning something is wrong with me and begins meaning my system may still be carrying more than it has had time to settle. That is a very different kind of night. Still not always easy, still not always quiet, but gentler. And sometimes gentler is exactly what allows the next shift to happen. If your mind gets loud at night, I hope this reflection helps you meet that experience with a little more kindness. I hope it reminds you that your mind is not your enemy, and that nighttime loudness is often less about dysfunction and more about what the body has not yet had the chance to release. I hope it gives you a softer way to understand yourself in those hours when everything feels louder than it does in daylight. And if you find yourself needing that kind of support often, I hope you let yourself receive it. Because understanding is support. Compassion is support. A gentler relationship with your own nervous system is support. And sometimes that is where the quiet begins. Thank you for being here with me. Namaste.